Hello, regular Drews.
Hi, everyone.
Back again for another episode. This is, what episode is this? 77?
76.
76.
Mhm.
76. And we are going to be discussing today Nancy Drew Mystery Stories number 60, The Greek Symbol Mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I learned that from the Nancy Drew detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
So I'll start by saying this one was published in 1981, and this is the 60th Nancy Drew mystery story.
Mm-hmm. It's also one of the last ones that Harriet Stratemeyer Adams ever worked on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next one, which is the Swami's Ring, that is the last one that she ever worked on. And so this is her penultimate book. So yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna break the ice, bite the bullet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not good. I didn't like it. It's really bad. Sorry to say. I really, 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 really struggled to read this book. I found that it was pretty much almost completely incoherent. I'm trying to be nice, which is like this is you being nice. So the plot, there wasn't one.
Right.
So, and it was very, very confusing, where they were, what they were doing, why they were doing the things they were doing did not make sense to me.
No.
Pretty much ever throughout the course of the book. So, yeah, it was very hard to read. I also felt like it was very much, even considering past the plot, like their kind of their characterizations in this one felt very much like white tourists go to a foreign country and decide that when people aren't being accommodating to them, it's their problem and not.
Oh, yeah, a lot of entitlement here.
So, it just felt like just not a good time at all.
No.
What do you think, Kori?
I can't even answer that without answering a different question first, I think.
Okay.
So let me talk a little bit about the game that was inspired by this, Labyrinth of Lies. So, and we can say inspired kind of loosely here. We said this before, but Her Interactive kind of tended in the earlier games to base a book kind of directly off of the source, or to base a game directly off of the source book. Later games, they did kind of just draw a few elements from the books, and then you kind of built a mystery around that. It wasn't a direct adaptation. Of course, this was a later game. It was number 31 in the series, so it is. I mean, I could definitely see what they pulled from the book here in order to get the game, where some of the other games, it's like, oh, all that you pulled is just the setting. With this, we have, of course, the Greek setting. We have the whole, like, missing artifact from the museum thing. And then there's also how freaking weird this book is. This game... I'll be honest, I enjoyed Labyrinth of Lies when I first played it. It's not by any means the best game in the series, which is totally fine. But I've heard from a lot of fans that it ranks really low for them, just based off of how freaking weird and bizarre that game is. Just because, like, what do you mean there's real lava on the set of a theatrical play? Like, what are you talking about? This book is even worse than that. Like, it makes less sense than the game. So if that's where we're starting from, if you guys have played Labyrinth of Lies and you're like, oh, it's a real weird one, I don't like it because it's so bizarre and it doesn't make any sense, you're going to feel that tenfold for this book because it's just so out there.
Yeah, no, oddly enough, like when I play Labyrinth of Lies, every time I expect that I'm going to understand it a little bit better.
No.
But I think every time I've replayed Labyrinth of Lies, I get more and more confused.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time playing it being so just like, wait, what's happening? Where are we?
I remember you hated
on?
it when it first came out. You told me.
I did. And I mean, okay, and like now, of course, I'm in a much different place than I was when I played it. But I think, like, it's a beautiful game.
Sure.
I think a lot of the puzzles were great. I think kind of the way that they did dialogue in that game was really good. But just overall, the plot of it, I just couldn't. I was like, we get no help in trying to figure out what the heck is going on here. And you really need it. You really, really need it. But so that's definitely what this book is. But I think maybe you are being a little bit generous when you say that, like, there's like the weirdness of that game that this book is tenfold. I almost don't even, I think that if it were like quote unquote weird, that I would enjoy it more than I did. I think there is like that this book is just so dry and so nothing happens.
Yeah.
I mean, like, if I wish there was real lava in this book to make me go, what the heck? Like, I wish that there was some weirdness in this book to make me, like, want to pay attention.
Sure.
But really, I felt like the whole thing was just a confusing slog through, they went shopping, they met these people, they went on this boat for no reason, and they got off the boat for no reason, and then, like, just nothing, kind of confusing ball of nothing.
Oh yeah. Well, weird can be like charming weird. And I think that the game is like charming weird, but this book is boring, confusing weird, which is a very important distinction. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad.
Yeah. And we're not here to talk about the game, obviously. That's not what we're here to talk about. Yeah. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that this did inspire that game. But ultimately, the similarities just lie with it. It's like, what is going on? And that's the limit of it.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think, now knowing that this was the book that game was based off, I almost want to be like slow clap for the game, because they managed to make something that was more, coherent than this. Like, props to them. It was a really great idea to make Nancy a bigger part of the museum, make it about the museum instead of making it about
whatever was going on.
This was. I don't know. I still can't even tell you.
Well, they don't even tell you. They don't even tell the reader till like a third or 3/4 of the way through until what the second mystery is.
Oh.
And we don't even have the Hardy Boys in this one to make up for it. At least the game featured the Hardy Boys. Like, come on now.
True. Yeah, this is gonna be a struggle to try to explain to y'all, because I mean, half the time I was just totally unaware of what was actually happening. So I hope it's at least fun to listen to us trying to explain.
So first 3 words is confusing weirdness. That's the first one.
Yeah. No, literally the first thing I wrote on I was thinking about what some of our 3 words could be. It was just what? Like, just, what? Why?
Yeah, I like that one.
Where? Who? The amount of times that I read a name and I was like, who is that? In this book.
And it doesn't even have the excuse of like being like the super mystery of there's too many people and that's why it's confusing to remember who is who. No.
They just don't tell you until after the fact. It's wild, you guys. Listen, okay. You guys know that we make this podcast because we are fans of Nancy Drew. We love Nancy Drew. We wouldn't be wanting to do this if Nancy Drew wasn't something that we loved so much. Don't read this book. Read something else. There are so many better ones out there than this. I love the illustrations in this book.
They're gorgeous, yeah.
But other than that, I think you should pick a different book to read. Spare yourself. I honestly don't want to go so far as to say this. Yes, I do. I think this may be the worst Nancy Drew book I've ever read.
Oh, wow. That's really saying something.
Yeah.
Even the girl detectives rank higher than this?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Because at least that is a book. You know what I mean?
You heard it here first, folks.
I just don't understand how you can write a book like this and publish it. Like
you as Harriet Stratemeyer Adams, who is responsible for so many wonderful, iconic Nancy Drew stories, to then produce this.
I've read a lot of bad books. I've read a lot of bad books in my day. And a lot of bad books I love.
Sure.
You know, like really trashy romance novels, like dumb YA stuff that I just love. I love.
Yeah.
This is so bad that I can't, there's nothing in it for me to enjoy. And this is somebody who would watch Nancy Drew like paint her toenails. Like you know what I mean? Like I suffer through a lot of Nancy Drew stuff that I don't think is good. This was a struggle, you know?
It was like, reading it was like they'd forgotten to write parts of it into the book.
Yes.
Like it was like, how did we get here? Something massive is missing. We're missing a really large component of this story. And then they just never explain it. We're just supposed to pick it up on the way as we go.
And I think, I mean, like, I don't know where the issue is, because it seems like an issue on like such a large level that it's like hard to like pinpoint, because I want to say like it's an issue with the plot. But so like when you think about the way that the Nancy Drew books were written and produced, there would be the outline, right? And then the ghostwriter would write it, and then it would come back for edits and back and forth however many times it needed to, right? Until it was the finished product. But is the outline bad? Is the writing bad? Like, it just feels like at every step of the way there must have been a miss, and then it didn't get edited at all. And this is just what got sent out the door. Like what happened? You know? Yeah.
Maybe this only needs one of the three words. Just confusing weirdness.
What?
No. What?
Okay, I will say there were a lot of cute Greek boys in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll give you that.
So maybe, so the three words can be confusing what's going on, cute Greek boys, and then
the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, there we go. That's it. Those are our three words.
Well, okay, I like what you said about the art, because admittedly it is gorgeous. So let's have one high note in this episode and talk about this beautiful, beautiful cover. I just love this. So you have the same art here, but it's the flashlight edition, so it's just zoomed in on Nancy's face. I do have the Wanderer edition of this book, where it is Nancy holding her artifact that she finds. We'll talk about that later, but she's just standing amongst some ruins with, I guess, what is Athens, like in the distance there.
Yes.
I love her outfit, first of all.
Yes. The neck the neckline on it with like the drawstring and the patterned white fluffy top. Gorgeous. This is a Ruth Sanderson illustration. I love the fact that she took like a way different tact than what we are so used to seeing with these Nancy Drew covers, and that she painted like an actual scene. Like, we get such weird covers. Like, no offense to the rest of them. I love Rudy Nappy. I think those are great covers. But there's such like an originality to her covers that you just don't see across the rest of the Nancy Drew books. Just so good. So good. So yeah, I wish, so like you said, I have the flashlight edition. I wish I could see more of the background in it.
Oh, of
That's
course.
like my one thing, because it's all zoomed in on Nancy's face, but
Here,
I can
I'll
just
hold it up so
yeah,
you
I
can
can
kinda
just
get in the
tell from
camera.
yours how beautiful that like backdrop is with the sky and the ruins. Yeah, that's gorgeous.
This picture looks like a nice summer European vacation.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love it.
Now,
I want to go.
let me say too, I really like the premise of this. Like, I like the concept of Nancy going to Greece to investigate a smuggling ring. I think that that's great.
Mhm.
And I wish that it had felt more like a Greek summer vacation with a little bit of a mystery thrown in. That would have been swell. I just don't think that that's what we got. So...
Yeah, the art makes me want to have a little Greek vacation, but the book does definitely not.
Yeah.
Wow.
But okay. Do you want to try to dive in? Do our best?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we start off, and Nancy is basically being sent to Greece by Carson to look for the cousin of this girl named Helen Nicholas, who is, I guess, some friend of theirs. You don't really know from where, from how. And her missing inheritance. So she's got a missing cousin and a missing inheritance.
Not that we're told this. We just learn it later on. We just get little pieces of,
Right. Her neighbor learns about her trip and asks Nancy to also look into a situation for her while she's in Greece. Apparently, this neighbor, whose name is Mrs. Thompson, has been sending money to a family in Greece to sponsor one of their children's education. However, recently she learned from the family that her money has not been getting to them. She sent her checks to this agency in New York who set up the program. And so she reached out to this agency to say, like, hey, what the heck's going on? Where are my checks going? And she learned that that office like closed suddenly. And all of the mail is being forwarded to this guy named Dimitri Georgiou. I don't know.
I don't speak a word of Greek. Couldn't tell you. I know the Greek alphabet. That's not going to help us here.
And that address is in Athens. And so that's why she's asking Nancy while she's in Athens to look for this guy. So she wants him to like track him down in Greece, wants Nancy to track him down in Greece and figure out whatever has happened here. So Nancy explains all of this to Bess and George, who are also accompanying her on this trip for, again, some unknown reason. Once they get on the plane, they have this layover in New York, and so they decide to try to investigate the closed New York office. But when they get to the building, there's like a tenant strike happening outside, so they can't get in. The girls are like stopped by the protesters because they think that Nancy looks like the daughter of the landlord that they are protesting. And so they just can't get into the building. So they go back to the airport. They get on a flight to Greece. Nancy ends up talking to the handsome young co-pilot on this plane, and he lets her look around the cockpit. Sorry. But then there's like this sexist, rude guy. He sees her going into the cockpit and he like gets angry that they're like letting a woman fly the plane, even though that's not what they're doing. But he thinks that they're letting a woman fly the plane. And so he gets mad because women aren't supposed to fly planes. And Nancy tries to explain the situation, saying like, no, I was just looking at the cockpit. And then he's like, good, women should know their place. It's overtly sexist. It's clearly supposed to be a sexist exchange. We're not supposed to like this guy. And we learn from the flight attendant that this guy's name is actually Mr. Isakos? Probably Isakos. When Nancy finally makes it to her seat on this plane, she then sees a piece of paper just like kind of on the ground, like someone had dropped it. And it's a letterhead for the Fotini company. I realized way after the fact that this is supposed to be the agency that Mrs. Thompson was sending her money to. And so she finds this letterhead for that agency on the plane for some reason.
Where else would it be? I mean...
and she looks at it, she picks it up, and someone has sketched a Greek letter on it. It's the Greek letter for phi, but it also has like these curlicues on the end of it. And after like further examining this piece of paper, Nancy sees that there are some other very faded words on the paper, and they determine it's a message in Greek that says, meeting at the Zapion on the 25th of May. I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of this correctly either. Zapion is this place in Athens, but the note has to be old because May was last month. And Nancy then also compares the handwriting on this note to a sample of Mr. Giorgio's writing that she has from her neighbor, and she sees that it matches. So this note must have been written by Mr. Giorgio, and then someone on this plane had it. Why? We don't know. I don't know that we ever really find out. They settle into their flight, and once the lights on the plane dim, they get some sleep. And when they wake up, Nancy checks her handbag and sees that piece of paper with the note on it is missing from her purse. Someone has stolen it. And they have no way of knowing who on the 300 other people on this flight could have taken it, despite the fact that there is only one other named passenger. We have no idea who it could be.
I wonder.
So they get to Greece and they go to their amazing hotel room, which, by the way, has a terrace view of the Acropolis. My gosh. They unpack, and a hotel employee brings them up a basket of apples. And there's no note on the basket of apples, and so they're not sure who it's from. But George takes an apple out of the basket and shrieks because there is a venomous snake inside. The girls are able to maneuver this snake into a trash can and get a hold of an employee to come up and take it away, but they're kind of shaken by this experience. And afterwards, they decide to go and track down the law firm that is handling the inheritance issue that Carson has asked Nancy to look into. They go to the address that they have, and they see that this law firm named Vaddis and Vaddis is gone. There's another business there now, and they ask the secretary about it. She says that the elder Mr. Vaddis passed away recently, and the younger Mr. Vaddis has just vanished, and they don't know where he is. So with no other leads right now, the girls decide to just do some... Okay, which also... What do you mean no other leads right now? You haven't tried to do any investigating. You've gone to one place. What leads? Like, you're not looking into the Fotini agency. You're doing... Anyway. So the girls decide to go sightseeing and shopping. They end up in front of a jewelry store where they see a gold mask in the window, and I guess Bess is interested in buying this gold mask. They go inside, but when they do go inside, someone is removing it, and they ask about it, and the shopkeeper says, oh, it's just been sold. So Bess buys something else, and then they leave. And then later, when they're sitting down for like a snack or break or whatever, Nancy looks in her bag and sees the golden masks. So someone must have like slipped it into her bag as she was leaving the store. She picks it up and looks at it, and she sees the same curly-cued letter phi on the back of it, like stamped into it. So they go back to the jewelry store to try to return it, but they're closed. So she decides that she's going to go to a nearby museum to see if they can give her any information on the mask. For some reason, I'm sorry.
Why is that your first thought?
But do we think that this mask is like a legit, like they've purchased like a Greek artifact at this jewelry store? And so they're going to the museum to ask about it because they think it's an artifact?
The only reason they should assume that is if they have already been suspecting that these people are up to something illegal. You would assume that it's fake unless you have reason to think otherwise. You don't just assume that it's real.
Well, and I mean, can it not just be a gold mask? Like, I don't understand, like, just
it doesn't have to be an artifact at all.
Right. They bought it at a jewelry store. Like, it's not like they bought it out of the back of someone's car or, like, off, like, at an archaeological dig. Like, it was just at a store.
Nancy just knows. She just knows the truth. She just doesn't know why.
So she goes to the museum, and upon seeing the mask, the museum employees pull her into this back office and call the police. Apparently, this mask was stolen from this very museum, and now they think Nancy's responsible for the theft because she came here with the mask. And so they're holding her and won't let her leave.
So luckily for Nancy, Bess and George actually weren't with her when she went to the museum. Bess ended up like getting a headache or something, so George and Bess went back to the hotel to rest for a little while. So at the museum, Nancy calls them and is like, hey, can you get in touch with Carson? Let him know what's going on. Bess is still sleeping, so George makes the call, but the hotel says it could take hours to reach Carson to like get anything done for Nancy, I guess. So instead, George just goes to the American embassy and talks to people there, which, okay. All right. So meanwhile, Bess is still back at the hotel room asleep, and she wakes up a little bit when she realizes there's somebody in their room. She like
Horrifying.
sees this man. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like just hears somebody like rustling next to her bed, and she wakes up and this man is just like leaving the room with the basket of apples that had the snake in it. So he just takes it and leaves. Like doesn't say anything, do anything, just was in here and is gone. So the phone rings, it's Nancy again, and Bess decides that she is going to go head over to the museum where Nancy is, and George is already on her way over there as well. So by the time she gets there, something must have changed in the situation because they're already letting Nancy go. And they're just telling her, like, we're letting you go with a warning, like, stay away from the museum's artifacts.
We get no explanation. We have no idea why they're letting her go. Or really why they held her in the first place.
Yeah. Yep. So now they realize they do have other leads that they can go with, actually. So they decided to go to the Fotini agency, and the office is fortunately still there. It's not out of business like the New York location was. They meet with the manager and explain what's going on with Nancy's neighbors. And they inform Nancy that they have no such family in their program. And then they get Carson like arranges for one of his friends to like loan his car to Nancy and Bess and George. Okay, so they get the car from Carson's friend, and then they decide to drive over to the Nikos Shipping Company, which is the company owned by Helen Nicholas's family. Nancy goes in.
Which, by the way, we also didn't know about. Like, nobody told us about that until we're there.
Nancy just knows that she needs to go there.
Going there. She just knows it and doesn't explain it.
No previous mention of the Nikos Shipping Company at all.
No.
Also, no mention previously of Helen's cousin, whose name is Constantine, but that's why we're there, is because Constantine has gone missing. Again, they don't tell us this. We're just supposed to infer this at some point before the book ends. So Nancy asks about Constantine, the cousin, and she's told that he doesn't work here anymore. He is too busy partying and wasting his parents' money from the inheritance, but they do give Nancy a photo of him, so at least we know what he looks like now. We have to comment on how handsome he is. And then I guess there's this nearby ship, and Nancy's like, can I go tour that? And they're like, sure, go right ahead. And so they do. No reason for us to need to go onto the ship, but we do. So we have to like get passes to get on the ship. We go get the passes, we get on board, and as soon as they get on, the freighter just starts to like sail away. And so they like freak out a little bit and are like, wait, we weren't supposed to go with the ship, let us off. And so they do. And that's what happens. Yeah. Huge excitement. But then we flash to the next day. They are in the car. They're on the way to the Papadopoulos family home, which is the family that, again, we're not told their name.
Yeah,
we're just
we don't know why.
The name
we
of
don't
the
know
family.
who they are.
This is the family that is supposed to be receiving the money from Nancy's neighbor, but hasn't been getting it. And so we're on the way there. We almost get into a car accident. We end up in a ditch, and then whatever, it's this whole rigmarole. But eventually we make it to the Papadopoulos family home. We meet everyone. They give each other gifts. Okay, this is really
Nothing
hard to explain. Yeah.
They don't do anything. They just meet them.
And so Nancy basically just like informs them why she's there, and then they leave, and then they go swimming.
Yeah.
Bess gets stung by a jellyfish, and this lifeguard there, his name is Alexis, and he's really hot. He comes and rescues Bess, and then Nancy's like, oh, hey, you would know who Constantine Nichols is, right? Just because you're a Greek person. And he's like, actually, I do, because my family is the family of a rival shipping company. Okay, great. She's like, do you know anything about Constantine having disappeared with this family inheritance and stolen money? And apparently the family wanted Constantine to like continue the family business when they inherited it, but now no one can find him. So that's why we're looking for him. So then the lifeguard invites the girls to go to dinner with him later and then do some sightseeing. And so they say yes. So they head back to the hotel. And when they get there, Nancy calls Carson, I guess from the lobby or whatever. And while Nancy's on the phone, Beth sees the same guy from the guy that had snuck into their hotel room and stolen the basket of fruit. She just sees him out on the street. And they notice that he is talking to the man from the plane, Mr. Isakos, the man that was upset that Nancy was flying the plane, even though she wasn't. So they sneak up closer and try to eavesdrop on their conversation, and they're talking about some church named St. Mark's, and something about mosaics as well. And then the two men walk into the same hotel where Nancy, Bess, and George are staying. So they go into the hotel as well, and they ask the desk clerk if Mr. Isakos is staying here, and they say, yes, room 986. Nancy goes, oh, our room is 968, so maybe the snake in the fruit basket was just meant for Mr. Isakos, and the delivery got mixed up or whatever, and that's why it got sent to us. It wasn't really a threat against us. So that's kind of a fun little play on the traditional, Nancy gets the threatening note right at the start. It really wasn't meant for her. And then later in the evening, they go on their little sightseeing dinner date with Alexis, and he tells them that he thought he saw Constantine at the Plaka earlier that day. Okay, so the girls decide that they're going to go over there tomorrow, but Nancy right now is asking him about St. Mark's Church, and he tells us that it is on the outskirts of Athens. So whatever, their little evening ends with him, and then the next morning they head back to the jewelry store to ask about the mask, and the clerk pretends that they have no idea what they're talking about, and I don't remember any such mask. And then they she goes to the back room, and then they overhear her talking about the hotel that they're staying at. This is all very bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it's in Greek, so they're not entirely sure what she's saying. They just overhear certain words, and when they leave, they get out their English Greek dictionary and try to translate it. And so they think that they were discussing something related to the three of them happening at their hotel around 8 p.m. that night. So they just decide to just go to their hotel and be there around 8 just to see what's going to happen. This is wild.
Yeah.
So they're in the they're hanging out in the lobby at 8, and Nancy gets a call at the front desk. So she asks George to take the call because she thinks that this is a distraction attempt for whatever else is about to go down. So George takes the call, and Nancy instead goes up to their room. She reaches the hallway where their room is, and she sees the man, just like the man who had already snuck into their room to take the apples. She sees him about to open their hotel room door. So she shouts at him to stop, and he sees her, and then he takes off running. So she follows him, but loses him eventually, and he ends up taking off in a cab with this other guy. She remembers, though, that as he was fleeing, he threw something at her upstairs. So,
why?
we talk about this later. But so they all go upstairs to look for whatever it was that he threw, and Nancy looks around and finds that it's this metal stamp with the weird curlicue phi symbol on it. So they have that now. And the next day, they decide to go to that church, St. Mark's, which turns out is actually not a church, it's a monastery. And they have to go in the middle of the night because that's the time that they overheard Mr. Isakos mention that they mentioned that time, so they have to go at that time. I don't know. So they go there, they sneak into this monastery because it's in the middle of the night. Then they hear there's this weird wailing noise, and all the monks wake up and run around, and then the monks just go back to their rooms. Then Nancy sees this flashing light. She thinks it's some kind of signal, but then they're caught by the detective who held Nancy at the museum, who, by the way, we didn't meet before. We're only meeting him now. We didn't even know there was a detective at the museum. We just know there's a detective now that Nancy did meet at the museum, and he's been following them and caught them here.
Right, because there was a security guard at the museum who we did meet, but this is a different man.
This is a different man. And Nancy tells him that they're actually here because they think that this monastery is being robbed tonight. We didn't know that. Nancy didn't tell us that before, but Nancy's telling this detective now that that's the actual reason why they're here, not because they overheard that guy talking about mention mosaics and this church. It could have been anything, but for some reason she thinks it's being robbed tonight. Okay. So then Nancy leads him down this path in the monastery where she saw this like man in a black robe go down before, and she thinks that man was Mr. Isakos or his partner. For some reason, she has no reason to think this, but she does think this. Of course, she's right, but anyway. They open this small room, and there's just a monk praying in there. And then the cop gets angry because he thinks that Nancy is just interfering in this case, like he told her not to do, and not helping the case at all. So he sends them home. The next day, Bess says she wants to go back to the jewelry store and ask the quote-unquote $1 million question, which is not explained either.
Right.
So they go back to the jewelry store, and Bess asks the clerk if Constantine Nicholas is there because she knows that he works there. How?
Again, it feels like somebody wrote this book, ripped out a few chapters, and then they published the version that's missing pages.
Mm-hmm. The clerk says that Constantine's not here right now, and then the clerk gets angry because she thinks that Bess is there to steal Constantine from her or something, because apparently she's dating Constantine. Okay. Then they leave the jewelry store, but later they meet up with the girl again. They just like run into her. Or actually, I guess she comes to find them wherever they are. And she apologizes for being rude earlier, but she told them that she hadn't heard from Constantine in a while, and so she's worried about him, and so she was like, just being kind of aggressive for no reason. She also introduces herself. Her name is Stella. But then they're interrupted by the same man they saw with Mr. Isakos, and so I guess the same man who was trying to get into their hotel room and took the basket of apples? Nancy doesn't make that connection there either, but that has to be because that's the only other man we've talked about, right? As being with Mr. Isakos.
Mm-hmm.
So he shows up and he grabs Stella and tells her that she has work to do and she better come with him, and basically manhandles her into a cab. She calls him Mimi. Like that's like his name. She calls him Mimi. And then they leave in the cab, but Nancy realizes that he's dropped a money clip in his haste to get away. So she goes to pick it up and she sees the initials DV on it. She thinks D stands for Dimitri because Mimi is like a nickname for Dimitri in Greek, which I guess is a good deduction.
Sure.
But we don't know what the V stands for. Then they decide to go to the Acropolis where Bess gets pickpocketed. They do end up reporting that to the police, and they even try to track down the child who is responsible themselves with no luck. And we really got to talk about this later because this is actually insane. But then we go back to the hotel. Then there's like this anonymous note left in their hotel room saying, "Surprise, we've checked into room 1100.
I'm sorry. If I got this note, I would check out of that hotel and never come back and be like, yeah, this is clearly a trap. So they immediately go to room 110, not room 110, 1100, against all better judgment. But actually, it's fine because it turns out it's just Helen Nicholas, who is Carson's friend that we're helping. And then also Mrs. Thompson, who apparently know each other already. I don't think we knew that they knew each other, but they're here together. They've decided that they're just too excited for Nancy to solve the mystery and like come home and tell them what happened. So they've decided to just come to Greece to see what the update is, what's going on exactly.
Is Nancy here then?
Yeah, if they were just going to come themselves anyway. And they're like, yeah, we rearranged our whole schedules to come. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. We're here. It's like, so you didn't need us at all. But yeah, so they're here, and Mrs. Thompson tells us that she wants to go meet Mrs. Papadopoulos and then maybe arrange to have her embroidery shipped into the United States so that they can sell it. this feels pretty exploitative to me. We can talk about that later. But yeah, apparently Miss Papadopoulos is like an insanely good seamstress, is really good at embroidery. And so their idea is to like set up a business in the US selling her imported work. So that evening, they all go to this amphitheater together. I'm going to butcher this name, Herodotus Atticus.
I think that's, pretty good.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so it's closed, but Helen convinces the guards to let them in. And they do. So once they get inside, they overhear some men talking, and they say that Constantine, who is Helen's cousin, is hiding out on Piraeus, which is at an island nearby, right?
I guess. I don't know. Okay, so this is another thing, is that we never explain the locations where we are, and it's like places have multiple names, like because they'll say that they're going to this business, but this business is actually in this place. And so this Piraeus place, like I'm pretty sure that's where the
it's a city. It's a port city.
Oh, okay, yes. I'm pretty sure that's where the like shipping, the Nikos shipping company is.
Yes.
But we don't know that. They just say, "Oh yeah, we're going to go back there. We're going, like, we've already been there." I'm like, "When did you go there? You didn't tell us when you went there."
Apparently that is Europe's biggest passenger port. Very
Okay.
cool. All right. Well, the more you know. It's a gorgeous city from what Google is showing me. So they go back the next day and park and look around, and they learn that the police are inspecting freighters for stolen antique vases and are looking for someone by the name of Isakos. They see the initials DG carved on the wall on the wharf and assume, obviously, this is Dimitri Gregorio, or however you pronounce his name.
Giorgio?
Yeah.
I believe that's Giorgio. I believe
Giorgio. Yeah, that makes sense. They ask someone nearby, and he brings out this other man whose name is apparently Demetrius Georgiakis, and not the person that they're looking for, just someone who happens to have the same initials.
And also the first, like, the beginning of the name is exactly the same.
Yeah.
But not the same guy. Okay.
Okay. Well, they asked this guy...
I'm sorry, how do we know that this isn't the guy that we're looking for? There's like, oh, this guy's name is Demetrius Georgiakis, not Dimitri Giorgio. So this is not the George you're looking for.
Also, why would he have carved his name on the wall? Like, what does that have to do with anything?
I don't know.
And why does the name
Kori.
being carved on the wall mean that he's our suspect? I don't know what this means. But he's not the right guy. But we do still interrogate him. So we're like, hey, the ship you just got off of, does that go to the US? And he's like, no. And he's like, whoa, that must mean that the fake artifacts are being sent to other countries. And then from those other countries are then being shipped into the US so that it's harder to track them. What artifacts?
What artifacts?
That's what we're looking into.
What the heck?
What is going on?
We came here under the premise that we are looking for someone's stolen inheritance and some stolen money. We get a mask. Cousin. And somebody's cousin who we don't know the name of, apparently, or we do, but we aren't told the name of it. Then suddenly we get a gold mask, normal gold mask, just stuck in our shopping bag. We end up going to a museum where they tell us, oh, hey, you stole this from us. We're like, no, we didn't. And now suddenly we think that there is this racket, not just of stolen artifacts, but stolen artifacts that are then remade into fake artifacts and then shipped to the US.
By Dimitri Gregorio, specifically.
Right.
We know that as well, but we don't know how.
Because DG's on the side of the wharf, even though that wasn't for the same guy. It doesn't make any sense. Make it make sense.
I'm so impressed that Nancy can glean all of that based off of some graffiti on a wall that has nothing to do with anything. So,
yeah.
We talked to the police, we asked what they've discovered so far, and we learned nothing. So they decide to go back to the car. The car doesn't start, though, so we assume that someone's been tampering with it. Great. Okay. And there's this little boy that just happens to be standing, I guess, near this parking lot. And he says he saw someone messing with the engine. And then after he finished that, he just got onto the freighter and left. So Nancy goes to ask the police for help and learns from two sailors that Constantine Nicholas now has a beard. Bess gives the police the name of the hotel so that she can contact us there.
I just put that in there
About-
because it's like Bess goes to the police for help because someone has sabotaged their car. Fine, good, that makes sense. Police literally do nothing. And then Bess just is like, okay, well, you can contact us here.
Yeah.
To do what? Like, what are they going to do? Like, what? Also, they never... Oh, I'm sorry. It's just
Yeah.
annoying. Sorry.
Well, in this scene, the police officer is like already talking to these two sailors. So she like goes up, interrupts the conversation, ends up really only getting information from the sailors, not the police, and then turns to the police and is like, here's my number if you learn more. Great.
Learn more about what?
So then we flash, we're on board the freighter. We're talking to more police here. And I guess Nancy had like asked the police to come with her onto the freighter. But then we see Mr. Isacos poking his head around a corner. Everybody, including the police, chases after him, which results in this like boat chase scene. And eventually they lose him, but they find the boat abandoned on the shore. And then there's footprints. And so they follow the footprints, which leads to a nearby road. And so they conclude that there must have been a car waiting for him. And so he's fled already. So we go back to the freighter. We question the crew a little bit, and they say that they didn't know Mr. Isacos was even on board. They also say that they've never heard of Constantine Nicholas, which is odd because one of those two sailors that Bess just talked to told her that Constantine frequently, like rides on this freighter or whatever. And they decide that they're going to search some crates on the freighter to see if the artifacts are in there, I guess.
What artifacts?
And the crew is instantly super weird about it. And like, no, you can't open those boxes. No, don't touch that. And they do still open it, but there's nothing in there. So Nancy decides that this boat and this ship is up to something. She just can't prove it and doesn't know what or why. Great.
So they end up getting their car fixed and they decide to go to lunch in a nearby town. And at lunch, some guy who just happens to be there and happens to know Mr. Vatis, the lawyer who represented Helen, and happens to know who Nancy is because he saw a news article about her or something from the United States, and overheard the other day Nancy asking about Mr. Vatis when she was at the office, and he also happened to be there at that time. He gives them a note and tells them that he thinks that Mr. Vatis might be on the island of Corfu. So, while Helen and Mrs. Thompson go to visit the Papadopoulos family, the girls fly to Corfu to go look for Mr. Vatis. They call around to different hotels and eventually learn where he's staying. It's this like cottage-like hotel room. It's like there's like different, little cottages that you can rent, and he's in one of them. So they go there and they leave George near the road, and Nancy and Bess go peek into the cottage. And then they see inside this cottage that there's a man wearing a gold bracelet and talking on the phone. They overhear a bit of his conversation, and he seems to be trying to sell the bracelet that he has on right now, which he says was found in the same year that the mask was.
Sure.
We never knew that this mask was dug up in a specific year, but apparently we did know that. Nancy knew that. We just, again, weren't clued into that. Then suddenly they hear George scream, and they turn, and George is gone. Someone has abducted George in a car, so the girls jump into the taxi that they left waiting, and a car chase ensues. Eventually, the kidnapper just ends up dumping George on the side of the road, and the girls reach her. She's bruised and dirty, but she's mostly okay. Nancy then calls Mr. Vatis' hotel and learns that he has checked out. So she wonders if the kidnapping of George was just a ruse to get them away from his hotel room so that he could escape. Did he know that they were watching him outside of his hotel room? Or was someone watching him and saw them and then was like, hey, we need to kidnap George so that he has a chance to get away? How did they communicate with each other if those people were just in a car?
Telepathy.
He was on the phone the whole time talking to a buyer of this bracelet. So how did he coordinate with someone to kidnap George?
To get away.
To allow him to get away.
It's the year. It's the year that's not really the year that we know. It's because he said a specific number. That was the code word to trigger the kidnapping plot.
Got it.
No.
Okay.
No.
So the girls then go back to their hotel for the night. They're looking out on the beach, and then they see Mr. Vadas talking to some other guy, and they appear to be arguing. So Bess calls the police, and George and Nancy go to confront the two of them. The other man leaves before they get there, but when they reach Mr. Vadas, and Nancy, introduces herself and explains, I'm Carson Drew's daughter. I'm here, to look into Helen Nicholas's inheritance issue or whatever. The man basically attacks her and then runs away. But he drops the bracelet he was wearing as he goes. And so Nancy looks at it and sees that, it has the same Greek symbol on the inside of it. Vadas gets into a motorboat and gets away. They call the police and they tell them that they think Mr. Vadas went back to his hotel. So they all go over to Mr. Vadas' hotel again. The police are there when they arrived, and they say that Mr. Vadas has barricaded himself into his room and won't come out. At this point, we get this weird, I guess we can overhear what Mr. Vadas is saying inside of his hotel room. And so we realize that he has now realized that his bracelet is missing. Then he lights some papers on fire, and the police end up breaking into his room and arresting him. He comes out, and he tries to explain to the police and to Nancy that no, that bracelet is rightfully his. It was payment for some legal services that he provided to someone. Nancy asks if it was payment from Constantine Nicholas, and she says that Vadas was blackmailing Constantine so Constantine gave him his bracelet to pay for that blackmail. But then Bess says that Constantine didn't know that Vadas was actually stealing the inheritance from him and Helen. So, okay. So I guess we've just guessed at the solution to this mystery, and we've just guessed that Mr. Vadas is the one who has stolen Helen and Constantine's inheritance via something. We don't know how. We just think he did it.
How lucky that guess was spot on.
But we don't get, he doesn't confess. He doesn't say anything to that.
Right.
But I guess that's what Nancy and Bess tell the police, and so that's why the police arrest him. Also, why did the police even arrest him? Why did the police show up? They're I understand George was kidnapped or whatever, but they don't know that Mr. Vadas had anything to do with that. So why we're hey, there's this guy, he's in his hotel room, he's talking about selling his bracelet. Come arrest him. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, we saw that guy again. He's on the beach. Come get him. And they just do?
Yep. Because Nancy, her word counts more. Yep.
In Greece, where nobody knows her, and the police were hey, stop investigating, you're ruining the case.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. Okay. Anyway, so I guess that mystery is solved. We know where Helen and Constantine's inheritance went. So then after Vadas is carted off, the girls go into his room and take pictures of the paper fragments of the burned paper that he just tried to destroy. Then they go back to Athens, and Nancy calls Carson and tells him that they solved Helen's mystery. And so Carson says that, quote unquote, we'll take the first flight to Greece. And Nancy tries to ask him, wait, who's we? Who's coming with you? But the line just goes dead.
Boy, I hope it's Hannah. It's Hannah, right? It's Hannah she's gonna be the one coming with him, right?
Wishful thinking.
Yeah. So later that evening, Nancy shows the photographs that they took of the papers that Vadas burned to Helen, and Helen, because they're all in Greek, so Helen is able to read them and translate them, and says, hey, this document is my uncle's will.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, time out right now. It's her uncle who died?
Yeah.
We just learned this.
Yeah.
Okay.
It seemed like her uncle didn't just own this shipping company or just have holdings in the shipping company. He actually had a bunch of different business holdings. And so Nancy wonders if Vadas forged Constantine's signature in order to get him to sell all of them to him and effectively steal all these assets from him, right? So the next day, Nancy and Helen go around to different banks to see if they can figure out which bank her uncle had used. First of all, why don't you just have some sort of documentation about the bank account or something
and
somewhere.
like, for what reason? Like,
Yeah.
what's that going to do? Like, if you think the stuff has already been stolen, what, like,
yeah. Okay. Well, eventually they do find the correct bank somehow, because there's a limited number in Athens. Obviously, this capital city only has like 3 or 4 banks, right? So they end up finding which bank it is, and they actually learn that that the uncle had a safety deposit box with that bank, and somebody has been paying to keep like the monthly fee for this deposit box. And actually, the next payment is due tomorrow. So Nancy has this fantastic idea. Hey, Helen and Mrs. Thompson, y'all should come back tomorrow, stake out the place, and just see who is coming to pay the fee for that. So Nancy and George stay at the hotel because they are waiting to get another call from Carson. And then Bess goes downstairs to shop a little bit more. She actually ends up seeing Stella, the one who is supposedly dating Constantine, who previously worked at the jewelry shop or whatever. We see her kind of like leaving the hotel gift shop really, really quickly, as though she's kind of like fleeing or trying to get out of there fast. And Bess decides that she's going to follow her a little bit and then go talk to her at the jewelry store. But then she gets to the jewelry store and learns that the previous owners sold it already. They'd sold it really quickly, fired all the employees, and there's this new proprietor, and everybody else who had previously worked there, like yesterday, no longer works there. So that's a dead end, obviously. We go back to the hotel, and Mrs. Thompson and Helen have actually already returned, and they did see who delivered the payment. It was just a messenger boy. He said that he was delivering it on behalf of Constantine Nicholas, who is currently living in the same monastery that they'd visited previously. Oh, so it's just that simple. Great. Okay, so they decide that they're going to go the next day, but not before Carson arrives tonight. So we learn that Carson is here with not Hannah, it's Ned, Bert, and Dave.
God, of course it is.
So then we have our just very, stereotypical moment where they all couple off and each team up and go in different directions. So the next day, Carson and Helen decide to go off to try to see Mr. Vadas, and the 3 couples head to the monastery to find Constantine. So everyone splits up, and Nancy and Ned head down this room that had all these beautiful mosaics in it. And Nancy thinks that the mosaics that she overheard Isakos talking about might be these same mosaics. But just as she says this, 2 men throw hoods over Nancy and Ned, tie them up, and then shove them into a large barrel that's in the room.
Well, it's a big barrel to fit both of them.
Yeah, and they're crammed in there, so neither one of them can really move because it's so packed, and so they can't get their ties off or anything. And Nancy is about to pass out because it's so hot in here, but luckily Bess and Dave come into the room just in time, hear them struggling inside the barrel, and let them out. But as they're getting out of the barrel, Nancy notices that, hey, those mosaics are gone. Clearly, they were just stolen by whoever tied us up and put us in the barrel. So Nancy thinks Constantine is the one responsible, obviously. And what do you know? George and Bert actually just saw Constantine. So they go up to this guy who's dressed as a monk, and Nancy compares him to the picture of Constantine that they got earlier. And it does seem to be the same man, so they confront him, and he confesses that, yes, I am Constantine Nicholas. He admits that he has been stealing artifacts, but he feels really bad about it, so it's fine. He says that it was actually he who planted the golden mask in Nancy's shopping bag because he knew that she would figure out what was going on and do the right thing and return it to the museum, because he wanted to do it himself but didn't know how to do it without getting caught. So he thought, I'll just have Nancy do it.
How did he know who she was?
Nah.
We didn't see him at the jewelry store, did we?
No.
There wasn't anybody there but the clerk that we talked to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He tells us that the purpose of that phi, the Greek symbol from the stamp,
phi and not phi.
It's both. Either one is correct.
Okay.
Don't quote me on this, but I think, if I remember this correctly, that it depends on whatever, what comes before it. So if it is a vowel that comes before it, you would say phi, but if it's a consonant, you would say phi. So I think it just depends on the context within the sentence, but technically both are correct.
So it's
So you would say alpha phi, but gamma phi. Yeah.
Never knew that.
Yeah. So don't quote me on that, but that's
Okay.
my very basic understanding of the Greek language from the very, very basic understanding that I have of their alphabet.
Okay.
So that's probably way oversimplifying it. And that was probably, I might have even flip-flopped them and got them wrong. But my understanding is that both of them are technically
Interesting.
both
Okay.
the correct pronunciation.
All right.
But I pronounce foreign languages always incorrectly, so who knows? But so he tells us that stamp that the bad guy had thrown at Nancy in the hallway of the hotel, they actually use that to identify which are the real artifacts and which are the duplicates.
Okay, wait a second. I'm confused though. So, of course I'm confused. But so did they stamped the duplicates, right? They didn't stamp the original because they didn't make the original. They stole the original.
I'm not clear on this because you would think that you're only going to stamp the fake one, like when you're making it, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what I assumed. But now I'm thinking back and realizing that the mask that was in Nancy's bag had the stamp on it. And she took that to the museum and they said, no, this is the stolen artifact.
Mm-hmm.
So unless they were confused as like, no, wait, actually, this is just a replica.
So are they defacing the original? And how do you put
That's
a
what
metal,
I'm saying.
how do you stamp metal without that metal being heated or softened in some way,
Right.
to, be able to receive the stamp? I'm not explaining that correctly, but like,
No.
like how are they doing that? Unless it's like
You'd
an
have
ink
to.
stamp. I doubt that they're stamping ink on there,
No, it's a gold mask. And
Right.
it's like we talked about it was like engraved into the mask. So they have to have heated the metal.
Right.
To put it also, okay, yeah,
Which
so
destroys the original.
Which destroys the original, damages the original. But even if it was a replica, then that means that they're making a replica mask out of real gold?
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Why
even
would
if
you
it's
do that?
cheaper because it's not old.
It's not cheaper. There's no way it's cheaper.
No.
Like,
okay.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay.
So whatever, they're using this stamp to differentiate between the real and the fake artifacts. And he also tells us that he never actually received his inheritance, but he agrees to do everything that he can to help Helen and Mr. Drew settle the issue. And he asks, hey, can I please stay in this monastery like indefinitely because otherwise I'm going to get sent to jail? And Nancy's like, yeah, sure. The monks will take good care of you. And the monks are like, yeah, that's fine.
What the heck?
I know. I kind of read this as the monks were like agreeing to make sure he doesn't get away while they're looking into the rest of this.
No, that's definitely what it is.
But why not just arrest him now if he is guilty? Anyway.
He just doesn't want to go to jail.
So we all drive away. We go back to Athens and Nancy spots Mr. Isakos jumping out of a car and tries to catch him. But then he turns around and just pushes Nancy into traffic. So that was a genius plan. But then Ned comes to her rescue. Everything's fine. And Mr. Isakos is stopped by some passerby who just like happened to witness everything. So they call the police and Nancy also tells them about how he tampered with their car and the basket of apples with the snake in it. And then his involvement with the smuggling ring. His involvement with the smuggling ring. And so they arrest him and cart him away. They go back to the hotel and Carson and Helen tell them that Vadas confessed to falsifying records and forging Constantine's signature. Luckily, he did not get all of the inheritance, and so Helen and Constantine are still going to get some money via some coins that were left in the safety deposit box and then some other, I guess, just random assets that the uncle had. Then Nancy decides that they all need to go to Piraeus, and so they do. They flag down Interpol on the way there. Naturally, I mean, what else would your first instinct be? And tell them, hey, stop that freighter that just set sail. So they do.
With no questions.
No
Interpol's
questions.
like, yep,
come
absolutely,
on.
Miss Drew.
We're boarding this ship. Come with us, Nancy. And so they do. And they immediately arrest both the captain and Dimitri Gregoriou, who is... who we know is the same Dimitri who stole Mrs. Thompson's money from the Papadopoulos family.
How?
We have no reason to believe this. Okay, so Nancy says that he helped hide stolen goods on the freighter inside bales of cotton, which apparently Carson had told Nancy that the U.S. authorities had found it on their end, so that's how we know that. And then we also say that he's the one who kidnapped George, and his real name is Dimitri Vatis.
This is the most wild one, I think.
Well, and she knows this from the money clip that they found, DV, and then Stella had called him Mimi, so clearly he's Dimitri Vatis.
The heck? No way!
And then we also learn that he is the brother of the lawyer, Vatis and Vatis. It's the brother of the younger one, right?
So the thing is that we don't learn this. Like, he doesn't confess to this. He doesn't say this. Nancy explains all of this. So he doesn't admit to his name being Vatis. Nancy is like, I know your name is Dimitri Vatis because the money clip said the initials DV. So that means your last name has to be Vatis, which means that you're the brother of this other Vatis guy who's a criminal. And that's why you're involved.
Yeah, sure. And we also learned that he came back to Greece and is running the scam in the U.S., I guess, with the Papadopoulos family and that whole Fotini agency and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then he learned about the smuggling operation from his brother, who'd been working with Constantine, so he found it out from Constantine, and says that he is the one who stole the mosaics from the monastery and the one who put the snake in the apple basket because he wanted to get rid of Isakos. And as we learn, that's who the apples were originally intended for. And she even says that the symbol must have been your idea. And we know that that's true, even though we have no reason to believe that.
Right.
And then later, Helen, with her very, very measly amount of inheritance that she managed to scrape together from whatever was left over from what they stole from her uncle, she still managed to have enough that she could spare enough money to buy a brand new super yacht. And we all go for a ride on at the end, and she makes this big announcement that she has decided to name the boat the Nancy Drew out of, gratitude for everything that Nancy has done for her. The end.
Oh my God.
So let me just try to get this straight in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's as far as you get.
Where do you even start?
That's it. That's all I got. That's all there is to get straight.
So there is this ring of smugglers who is stealing artifacts from museums and then selling them in jewelry stores after they have melted them down, stamped them, and made a duplicate of it. They're selling them in these stores to then have them shipped out and then repackaged in some way from another third country to then be shipped into the U.S. and sold there for, I guess, a higher value. But then also the people that are doing this is brothers with the guy who did lawyer work for the Fotini agency, who helps, I guess, families get connected with pen pals who give them cash in the mail, and then stole money from that too. And then Nancy learns all of this because some guy in a hallway threw a stamp at her. Is that right?
I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Great. Okay. So that was the big symbol mystery.
It was. What a mystery indeed. Very mysterious.
Was it a mystery?
Well,
was it a mystery?
I've certainly never read a more mysterious Nancy Drew book. To this day, I still don't understand it. So mysterious.
That's high praise compared to what this book deserves.
Okay. So by this point, if you haven't actually read this book, you probably understand why it's so confusing.
Your summary was a lot more coherent than the book.
I did my best.
If any of this made sense and you're like, guys, that totally, the summary, I get it. The book can't be that bad. Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. I did my best to make the most sense out of it for you so that you
were
would
as successful as anyone could ever be.
But yeah, it's so confusing. It doesn't make any sense. I think that the mystery itself would not be so bad, or would not be at least out of the norm from what we get in most Nancy Drew books, and being oh, weirdly, these guys decided to do this, and then they, as far as the crime goes. But I think the thing that makes it so just unreadable is the fact that we, as the reader, don't get any explanation for any of it. Because it's all well and good to say, like, okay, well, this is a really unrealistic crime. That happens over the course of like almost all of the mystery stories
Sure,
that
yeah.
I can remember. It's like, okay, so these people are just making fake antiques and selling. It's always weird and random, and they also weirdly randomly connect to multiple mysteries that Nancy ends up putting together very coincidentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least in those, we understand where Nancy is going and why, and what it is she's doing and why. Even if it isn't the most, even if a lot of it is coincidence, even if she's not doing a whole lot to get there, it's being kind of fed to her, at least we understand Nancy's goals, we understand her motivation.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get that in this book.
No.
We don't get any understanding of what Nancy is doing and why. We don't get an understanding of where we are. We don't get an understanding of who we're talking to, who the bad guys are, even really what the mysteries are that we're investigating. We don't know any of that until after the fact. And like, and the way that they present it is like, well, you're supposed to have known it. Like, you should have known it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what the heck? The heck?
This was so rough.
That's why it's so bad, because like, we can talk about plot holes and we can talk about all of that, but I think, and we can talk about, weird crimes and all these coincidences and everything, but at the core of it, the thing that makes it so bad is that the, I don't know, author, editor, whoever you want to attribute it to, publisher, they don't make any attempt to bring the reader along in the mystery, which is honestly like the whole point of a book. Like, like you're not making a mystery for the mystery's sake. You're making it to present it to an audience.
The mystery is supposed to be, an actual mystery that Nancy's solving, not this information that Nancy knows and is keeping it a mystery from us as the reader. Like, she knows a lot more than we do.
It's a story for the reader, right? It's not for Nancy. So it doesn't matter what Nancy knows. Like, it matters what the reader knows.
Yeah, I shouldn't be more curious about what Nancy's keeping a secret than I am about the actual artifacts being stolen.
Yeah. Right. Anyway. On a completely side note, I think Helen and Carson have a thing.
I was gonna say, is this going somewhere? That's fine. Okay,
because let me find it. There's a point where he gets there. Hold on. Let me find it. Okay, it's in chapter 18. So yeah, because it's very soon after Carson gets there. And he's talking about how he and Helen need to go do this thing. Yeah, so he says, perhaps Helen and I ought to pay a visit to Mr. Battis to try to like get him basically to confess. And that's fine with me, Helen said. She smiled at the attorney, who responded with equal warmth in his eyes. Nancy glanced from one to the other. Dad, should I go too? She asked, trying to suppress a feeling that she might be an intruder.
Ah!
No, dear. That won't be necessary, her father answered.
He wants her to be gone.
And then also, I'll just say too, something else I noticed at the end of the book, Helen doesn't call him Mr. Drew, she calls him Carson.
That's telling.
She calls him by his first name.
Very telling. That's amazing.
Oh my God. We don't know Helen's age, but I kind of assumed that she was nearer to Nancy's age than to Carson's, but that may not be the case. She may be older,
I don't know. I kind of read this as she was more Carson's friend than anything.
Okay. That's the thing. I wish we had gotten more introduction to Helen. Obviously, all we know at the very beginning is that, not at the very beginning, along the way, is that, that Helen is somehow like a family friend of Carson and Nancy, and Carson's just helping her with this inheritance issue. Like she's a client of his or something.
If you're going to tease all that and give us all that, we need more information about Helen. We need it to, like, go somewhere. We need something to happen. You can't just have this little flirty moment and then drop it.
No.
And then she's just calling him Carson for the rest of the book.
No.
I need some more information.
Also, okay, I know that her name is Helen Nicholas. I know that she is not Helen Archer. I know. But, or Helen Corning / Helen Archer.
Yeah, of course.
But why would we reuse the name Helen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very common name, especially for this time. But
I mean, yeah, but there's like a lot of different choices. Anne, Emily, Rachel. Like, so many common, basic white girl names like Helen. Like, why would we reuse the name Helen, a very famous character in the Nancy Drew series?
To be fair, she hasn't been like featured in one of the books for a long time by this point. But you're right; it's not like we have other Besses and Georges and other Neds in the series. No. Why would we duplicate a Helen? That's interesting.
And I know that she's supposed to be Greek. Like, clearly her last name is Nicholas, and I know that she lives in the U.S. So maybe her parents have given her a more Anglo name or whatever. Why wouldn't we just give her a Greek name?
Although I wonder if, like, the Nicholas being the last name because it's the Nico shipping company, I wonder if that is also an Americanized version of the name. And so maybe it's just that her parents Americanized their name and wanted to have her have, like, more of a U.S.
Sure.
Because, I mean, there's a lot of, like, Hellenistic stuff associated with Greece, but...
Okay, but then why wouldn't we give her the name Helene? Like, let's just name her Helene.
That's a pretty name, either way.
It is a beautiful name. Anyway.
Speaking of Americans and Americanization, let's just talk about the American entitlement in this book. Okay. How they just assume everyone will cater to them as Americans, how everyone will automatically be able to converse with them in English and are not happy when someone cannot. Yeah.
So I think the thing, the plot point that typifies this for me so much is a plot point that I really skimmed over because it doesn't matter at all. They spend way too much time on it for, what this book is actually supposed to be about. But it's when Bess gets pickpocketed at the Acropolis and then they try to track down the little boy who stole it from her. They end up going to, like, an exchange like place where money is exchanged, currencies are exchanged, and because obviously a lot of Bess's money in her wallet was U.S. dollars, and they assumed after they reported it to the police that whoever it was would attempt to go to get it exchanged into Greek currency, right? And so they go to all these different places, and they end up going to one where they see a little boy kind of on his own, seems like, and Bess is like, that's it, that's the boy who stole my money. And Bess goes up to him and grabs him and shakes him and is like, give me back my money. But Nancy and George both go up to her like, are you sure that's him? And she's like, yes, it looks just like him. And George's like, are you sure? I'm pretty sure that little boy was wearing different color shirt or something. And Bess is like, no, I'm sure, but ends up that that's definitely not the boy, and he's actually there with his mom and all this, and Bess is just like, oh, it was a mistake, and they just leave. But
that's so concerning.
I'm sorry, if I was that Greek woman and some white lady was shaking my child, accusing him of theft, and then just oh, my mistake, and leaves, I would be so pissed off.
You can't assault a child like that.
My child, what the heck? And I will say that in the book, it's not presented that Bess is doing the greatest thing with that.
Sure.
But she doesn't get nearly any kind of reprimand, or not from the mom. We don't even get to see the mother. George and Nancy only gently try to be like, hey, I don't know if that's him. They don't say, hey, don't touch him, or hey, let's go away. None of, they don't try to break it up. They're just like, oh, it was a mistake, and they just leave.
Even if it was him, you shouldn't be grabbing a child and shaking them like that. No. Goodness.
I mean, also, I think, okay. Now listen, I know that stealing is wrong. I know that, whenever that you are a victim of a crime when you have been pickpocketed, your money, your purse has been stolen. I get it. And I understand why you would even want to go report that and why you would want to pursue it. But it just seems to me that, like, you're going to a foreign country and your money gets stolen. That sucks. It totally sucks. I don't think that you have the right as a foreigner to come in and be like, I expect someone to, like, follow up on this on my behalf. You know? Like, it just doesn't seem like that's a right that you have as someone who isn't a citizen of that country.
Right.
And the way that they go about going to the police and just, like, following up on this crime themselves, because it doesn't seem like the police think that they can do anything about it, just feels very much like they feel like that they have a right to pursue justice in that country in a way that I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Very
sorry,
different.
but, like, it's not your place to investigate a little boy who stole your money.
Yeah.
Like, it just feels it feels very entitled.
It does, yeah.
You know?
Things are going to be handled differently depending on where you go. That's you don't have an idea of what that procedure is going to be like. Don't take it into your own hands.
Right.
Especially because now you've assaulted a child.
Yes.
And why are you committing crimes in foreign countries?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good idea, Bess. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yeah, and then, like, so, like, everywhere they go, it's like they are expected to be treated better because they are tourists.
Right.
And it's just wild. Like being able to get on a freighter, like, why you don't have any, even as not a tourist, you don't have a right to get on some random freighter and then expect the freighter to stop for you and just let you off. Like, it's just so, just an arrogant approach. And it's like, well, okay, so this is why people don't like Americans.
Arrogance is absolutely the word for it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, like, I don't know, getting stung by a jellyfish and having to be rescued by a Greek lifeguard. It's just like, girls, like, get it together. Get it together.
Oh my gosh. This was so weird.
Okay, let's see. What else?
Oh, you have a comment about the British government?
Yes. So, yes. Okay. So they go to the Acropolis? I forget where they go. Oh, I gotta find it now. And they have this whole conversation. Okay, yes. So they're going to the Acropolis. They go in. There's the Parthenon. George is talking about the columns. Then, okay, Nancy's gaze traveled to the north side where a magnificent colonnaded hall had once overlooked the old marketplace. You know, a number of sculptures were taken from here in the early 1800s, she remarked. Were they stolen? Were they stolen? Bess asked instantly. No. Lord Elgin, who was the British ambassador in Turkey at the time, received permission from the government to remove the pieces. Athens was then part of the Turkish Empire. Bess's expression remained quizzical. What did Elgin do with the sculptures? She inquired further. He sold them to Great Britain, which in turn placed them in the British Museum in London.
I'm sure Greece got the proper financial compensation for those items, too. Every last cent, yeah, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, wow. Like,
amazing.
They weren't stolen. They were stolen legally by the British government.
Excellent.
I just thought that was hilarious.
Excellent little disclaimer.
They do also happen to mention that George mentions that other statues were also recently removed by the Greek government. Mm-hmm. And Nancy says, yeah, because of pollution and the fact that tourists had started to chip off marble for mementos. So at least there's a little bit in there about maybe why people don't like American tourists or any tourists ruining their history. But yeah, just so wild that's the perspective. Yeah.
Another very telling thing about just American attitudes and how things work when we go abroad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I do have one more thing that I just realized, and that there is just, to note for, the way that we track this throughout the books. There is a nasty comment that George makes about Bess here.
Mm-hmm.
They're eating a picnic, I think, or they're eating at the Papadopoulos family home, and then they're on their way back. And on their way back to Athens, Nancy and George praised Bess extravagantly. It's the first time you didn't go for a second helpings, George teased.
Oh.
Now that you've started the diet, how about sticking to it? Bess did not retort.
Poor Bess.
Poor Bess! My God.
George is also, not that it's as important, but every time Bess talks about something she wants to buy, like a souvenir, George is critical. And it's like, you don't really need
Haven't
that.
you spent enough money?
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
We're in Greece. We're on vacation. Do you think I'm going to come back here to buy this? No, I get this one chance. One time. Yeah, I just don't.
It's not like y'all have combined finances, no. George. She can spend her own money how she wants to.
It's just, I do think, so I just wanted to make a note of it because of the fact that we are, trying to keep track of those moments throughout so that we can see how they change, right? I'm surprised that this was something that they decided to kind of highlight and do in a book in 1981 even. Mm-hmm. It just feels really, it feels like at that point in time, not that diet culture and all of that had really greatly improved. I know, it was still really bad. But it just seems like maybe that would have been handled a little bit differently than that. But yeah, just in general, I just don't understand why we have to make Bess the character that gets constantly crapped on for pretty much just every choice that she makes, with the eating and the, dating a lot and buying stuff and liking clothes and makeup, boys and all that stuff. It just seems to me like we are choosing to hate on a quote unquote traditionally girly feminine character. And that just feels so bananas to me for a book series that seems to have been created to cater to girls and girls' interests. And it's like, well, yes, we want to appreciate and, stand up for girl power or whatever, but not that kind of girl. You can't be basic. If you're basic, we don't want you. It's like that. So it seems like the message that they're giving, and it's really crappy. It's really crappy.
It is, yeah.
So
what a shame that we couldn't get rid of it by this point. I know, obviously, we've read later books in the series that are just as bad with body shaming and comments like that. But it's such a shame that even in the 80s, we couldn't get away from it. I know that in the 30s, that was socially acceptable. Fat jokes were considered funny at the time. Doesn't mean it was okay at the time. It was still hurtful at the time. It was just more socially acceptable. And somehow we just continued this same trope without without taking a step back and looking at it until what feels like the early 2000s even. Right. Yeah, it's really, really a shame that we couldn't think about it at any point in time, especially for this. Yeah.
Yeah. I realized too something else that I wanted to talk about that I hadn't made specific notes about, but that I had thought about kind of a lot when reading this book is how much this book is actually about class. And I think that kind of really ties into how I was feeling about, this whole tourism thing and the girls acting entitled. It's very much framed as them being wealthy and acting wealthy and doing wealthy people things and investigating wealthy people's, crimes against wealthy people. And it has a lot to do with money. And even the smuggling ring is about, stealing money and essentially profiting off of fake artifacts, right? So it's essentially acting like you're a class that you're not, right? That's really what that that crime is about. And, stealing money from, the poor Papadopoulos family. But then what ends up happening to essentially get them to, quote unquote, make money and bring them up to a higher class because they're more deserving, we're actually going to get them involved in a business where we control their money.
Yes, we didn't even talk about this. This felt so exploitative. Like, instead of just continuing to give the payments that Mrs. Thompson had been giving them, no, it's you're going to work for me and do as I say and make all these embroidery projects that I'm going to set the price for and I'm going to import because you couldn't sell them here in your own community yourself? Sorry, I interrupted you too.
No. That's exactly the point that I was trying to make. But I also think it's interesting too, the fact that it's very specifically stated that Mrs. Thompson is giving money in the first place to this family in order to pay for one of their children's education, as if just giving money to this family for any other reason would not be, quote unquote, worth it.
Right.
If she was just paying for food or whatever it was that they needed, no, it has to be for a way for them to better themselves, because otherwise it's just a waste of money. Oh my gosh. So yeah. So I think that's another reason why this book is so I'm trying to think of a different word, but the word I just want to say is bad. I think that's one of the reasons why this book does not, that I do not like this book as much as I've liked other Nancy Drew books, because I think there is just a total just disregard to the reader, in the creation of this book. But I also think that it's written from a perspective of, a classist perspective. Yeah. So
it definitely is.
Yeah. That's my review.
I like it even worse after having done the summary now.
Yeah. So, flashlight score?
Oh, thank goodness it's over with now. 1.
Yes, my score would also be 1.
Yes.
So, yeah. Like I said before, and I stick to it, I do think that this is probably the worst Nancy Drew book I have ever read. Sorry.
Yeah.
But you know what? There has to be one that is my least favorite.
There has to be a worst one.
There has to be a worst one. And so hopefully now, moving forward, all of them will be better.
Yeah. I'm going to assume that that's the case. They're all going to be better than this one.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next episode. Episode 77, which is I love that number, 77. It's a great number, is actually going to be another Nancy Drew Digest. It's going to be number 69, Clue in the Ancient Disguise.
Very nice.
I also have one with a Ruth Sanderson illustration on it. So I'm very excited to read this one. It's got illustrations on the inside too. God, look at that.
So good. Oh my gosh.
They're so good.
So detailed too. Very a good little.
I just broke the spine.
Oh no. Very different from the line drawings from the original 56. Well, not even all of them have internal illustrations, but yeah.
I mean, okay. Look at Nancy's face here. I'm trying to get my camera to focus. Look at that.
Oh wow, gorgeous.
Yeah.
What a beautiful image. Very richly illustrated there. Yeah.
So, yes. So I'm very excited to get to read this one. I guess I'll read the back really quickly for y'all, because I actually don't even know what this one is about yet. Nancy is asked to help a young French engineer who has uncovered a mystery surrounding an 18th century ancestor and a letter found among his grandfather's papers.
Okay.
As the young detective attempts to solve one mystery, she also investigates a series of strange incidents at the River Heights Arts Institute. Although nothing is ever taken, the institute is plagued with burglaries. Undaunted by attempts to stop her, Nancy uses her incredible sleuthing skills to follow the mysterious clues, including an amazing find in an old costume, and unravel this intriguing tale. That is the worst back cover I think I've ever read. Whoever read that needs to do better. The undaunted by attempts to stop her, Nancy uses her incredible sleuthing skills to follow the mysterious clues. That's that's every Nancy Drew book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Although the components are there, sounds promising.
But overall, sounds good. Sounds like we're gonna have a mystery close to home this time.
Ready for it? Mm-hmm.
So coming back from Greece, we ain't gonna do. We're home now. So yeah, hopefully it won't be quite as many. Nancy being awful and weird in a foreign country. So
yeah.
So I'm excited for that. And I guess we will see you next time, regular Drews.
Yeah, join us then.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there,
Thanks for listening.